What's up, RotoGrinders? Welcome to another edition of FanDuel Friday. Going to be breaking down tonight's NBA slate. We got 11 games. It's a big one, and so I can't be doing it by myself. My name is TJ Zwarych, and I'm joined by my co-host today, Justin Carlucci, TheRealLuuch. How are you?
Good. Another Friday, another big slate. A lot of pending news, but we'll do our best here to discuss what we know.
100%. We typically don't really do the whole game by game thing here for the FanDuel Friday show anyways. We got morning grind for that. We'll be breaking down the late news on crunch time. They'll be going game by game on Grinders Live. We're more so going to talk some general strategy. And now before we get into specifics of players and games, stuff like that, the biggest thing that stands out for me on top of the players that we already have missing in today's in today's game set of games, like Joel Embiid, Zion Williamson, Bradley Beal, most likely Kawhi Leonard, Devin Booker, Donovan Mitchell, etc., etc., etc. On top of that, we got 11 games, and they're almost all high totals and close spreads. Even some of these games like New York and Toronto, that the total's not that high, but it still has some sneaky tournament potential. Even a game like Charlotte and Milwaukee, where it's a 10-point spread, still a lot of fantasy goodness available in this one. So the biggest thing that stands out for me on this 11-game slate is don't be looking for floors. Don't be looking for, hopefully, this guy 5Xs. It's going to be a high-scoring slate today, and we need to find some players who are going to put up some big scores. Our value plays need to be 7, 8, 9, 10Xing. Our expensive plays need to be putting up 60 FanDuel points at least. So it's a wild slate, and I think we need to be specifically targeting upside.
I couldn't agree more. And it's a pretty big slate. You can see a lot of these high projected point total guys are coming in at pretty low ownership so far early in the day. There isn't a ton of obvious value, but there's some. But I mean, I'm willing to bet one of these guys, on the top of my screen here, goes for 60 plus fantasy points at least. So where do you want to start here, TJ? I'll throw it over to you.
Now it's still early in the day and we're waiting for news, so this may adjust, but the biggest thing I want to actually start by looking at is by sorting for projected ownership, because for an 11-game slate with so many high totals, we have an obscene amount of concentrated ownership right now, and it's just the easiest thing ever to say, see ya, never mind, I'm going to do something else. Najee Marshall, Keldon Johnson, Onyeka Okongwu, Killian Hayes, all of these guys over 30%. Najee's obviously has some stupid ownership right now, but I'm sure that'll go down a little bit. I think you can just fade all of them in tournaments. Run a tournament lineup and don't play any of these players, because there are so many good options on today's slate, and we don't really have to worry about playing these chalky guys. Like on an 11-game slate, yes, he is a good value, but how worried are you really that Najee Marshall is going to put up a score that says, I'm screwed if I don't have him today? He played 32 minutes last game in this exact same position, had 26 fantasy points. Yeah, that's good, but not 65% good. Like, I need this dude to be projected for 40, 50, 45 fantasy points if I'm going to be playing him at 65% ownership. So I'm sure that'll drop probably like the 30 to 40% range, but that's still something that is far too much for my comfort levels today. And this entire group of plays just is kind of, I'm not very interested in getting to it. There are some specific teams on FanDuel that are just a lot cheaper than they are on DraftKings. And so one of those teams that I want to outline quickly is the Washington Wizards. No Bradley Beal today. And Kyle Kuzma is 7-7 over here on FanDuel. Kristaps Porzingis is 9-3. That's one of my favorite tournament plays on the entire slate. Daniel Gafford and Denny Avdia, they're a bit cheaper on another site, and so I'm probably more interested in them somewhere else. But Kristaps Porzingis and Kyle Kuzma in this one. Great tournament plays. I think Kuzma provides a nice combo of ceiling and floor. He's getting a little bit more owned, though, and so Kristaps Porzingis makes for one of my favorite tournament plays on the whole slate. Before we start going through a few more of these games here, you talked about, before we got started here, Chicago and Philly. We're going to have some Philly chalk with Tobias Harris and DeAnthony Melton. That's fine by me because my two favorite players on Philly aren't either of those guys. It's James Harden and Tyrese Maxey as my two favorite players on Philadelphia today. But you were saying that Philly, even though a strong defensive team, often gives up points to the other team's go-to guys, and now they don't even have Joel Embiid.
I don't understand it. It's a story as old as Father Time, TJ, and defensive ratings, like with Embiid on the court, they're arguably, I think statistically, actually the best defensive rating team in the league of the season. But even when Embiid's healthy, they just get torched by wings more oftentimes than not. Now you have two fantastic wings that are great at scoring the basketball, and Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan. I don't know which guy it's going to be, but with Embiid off the court, I can almost guarantee one of these guys is going to have a ceiling game. And that, I shouldn't say guarantee, but that's my hot take, is that one of these Bulls wings breaks the slate tonight. And we saw Buddy Hield go absolutely bonkers. We saw Tyrese Halliburton score about 50. I know that game went to overtime, but Buddy Hield was going to be pushing 50 fantasy points before overtime. And Halliburton was on pace for 50 plus heading into the third quarter. And Hield took a lot of that usage. But I like these Chicago wings, and DeRozan, had a couple down games, but he was hitting 50 to 60 points, had a really torrid stretch the past 2 weeks. So if I'm looking for tournament plays, I'm not looking much further than the 7 o'clock tip-off between Chicago and Philadelphia. That being said, I heard through the grapevine you like somebody else in this game.
Yeah, so this is kind of site dependent for me as well. A guy like Nick Vucevic is cheaper if you shop elsewhere, but he's so low owned on FanDuel today. I think he makes for a very interesting tournament play. Where I do worry about him on FanDuel is that ceiling that we talked about. Does this guy have 60-point upside? And I'm not really sure if he does. And at that price tag, I'm not sure if we can get there. Zach LaVine's price looks really good, but with no Embiid, doesn't this just feel like a DeMar DeRozan game? Yeah. He's going to be getting to the rim at will, pulling up in the mid-range anytime he wants to. Like, there's a couple good wing defenders here, but, like, none of them are going to be able to match up with DeMar DeRozan. DeAnthony Melton's too small. James Harden's too slow. And Tobias Harris is definitely too slow. So I really like some DeMar DeRozan in tournaments today as well. Because this is such a quick slate, I'm just going to rip over some other tournament plays that I like quite a bit. Obviously, the guys who project very well and are projected as chalky, we don't got to spend too much time talking about them. They're great plays for a reason, but some tournament ones I want to outline. Dame Lillard at 9-1 on FanDuel against Indiana, I think is a great tournament play. CJ McCollum, 8-4 going up against Brooklyn. I expected him to be a lot more chalky. He's coming in at 14% ownership right now. That could go up, but Trey Murphy and Herb Jones, I like both of them as pivots over Najee Marshall in that New Orleans game. And then the next one that I want to spend a bit more time on for tournaments here is New York and Toronto. We don't have a super high total, but I think there's a lot of fantasy goodness here because both of these teams are going to play their starters 40 minutes. These are the two teams that their starters lead the NBA in minutes. Julius Randle has been on an absolute tear and now isn't going to pick up any ownership because it's a tough matchup and its price has gone up. I didn't quite expect this type of ownership for Emmanuel Quickly today. I do think he's got a nice floor with the heavy minutes he's going to play, but a 20+% Quickly, that's something I think I'm going to get off of in tournaments. But Jalen Brunson, to me, that's kind of some good chalk. Playing big minutes, playing so well lately, floor and ceiling combo, like getting me some Jalen Brunson today. But it's and him and Julius Randle are going to be my biggest priorities. This does make for an interesting game stack as well. Pascal Siakam, very cheap on FanDuel. Fantastic tournament play today, Siakam is. He's one of my favorite tournament forwards on the slate today. Fred VanVleet, probably not somebody I'm going to get to on FanDuel. Same with Gary Trent, but and even probably same with Scotty Barnes. Those are more plays I'd want to get to on another site. But OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam, I think, make for great tournament plays. And then swap into this 8 o'clock set of games here. We'll spend some time on Detroit and San Antonio because that game has so many players projecting well and it's disgusting. And so we kind of have to talk about it. But before we get there, I want to talk about Charlotte and Milwaukee because this is a big spread, but it's a phenomenal matchup for Milwaukee. Still no Chris Middleton here. Giannis is the best, in my opinion, raw points play on the entire slate. Okay, no, it's not just an opinion thing. He's 5 points projected higher than anybody else. He is the best raw points projected play on the slate. I think there is, if you were running a ton of lineups today, I think there is wild leverage you could get on the field here by saying, I'm going to play one of Giannis Antetokounmpo, Bobby Portis, or Brook Lopez in every single lineup today. Charlotte's horrific against big man. They're one of the bottom 5 teams in the league for points in the paint. This is just a horrific defensive matchup for them to try and hold Milwaukee's offense here. Giannis is probably going to go bonkers. He's also tough to get to today. If he's 15% owned, why don't I try and go 30 to 40% Giannis and then 30% Portis and Lopez? Huge GPP stands, but if Giannis isn't going off today, it's probably going to be one of those two. Brook Lopez, we've seen huge ceilings from him. Charlotte gets blocked quite a bit. Lopez is going to hit some threes and he's going to block a lot of shots, and he's got a 60-point ceiling at a price tag below 7K. Bobby Portis, maybe not as high of a ceiling as those other guys, but he's got a great floor. And if this game does turn into a bit more of a blowout, he should see a little bit more extended minutes in this one, as opposed to Giannis and Lopez. He's not going to play the full blowout run, but he'll probably get that. He won't be pulled quite as early as those other two. So I think that's a very interesting strategy today if you're playing a lot of lineups, to make sure you have one of the Bucks big men in there with you. And then if you do decide you want to run back because you're playing Giannis, Terry Rozier, super cheap, 6,500. And then you always got LaMelo Ball as a viable tournament option as well.
What I'm thinking here is, and you know what? Charlotte's been playing some horrific basketball, and the Charlotte-Memphis stack from 2 nights ago left a lot of points on the table for me because they were getting throttled. I had some really, really interesting game stacks and some low-dollar, large yield stuff that I really wish I had a fourth quarter run out of some of those Charlotte guys. Well, guys on both sides, actually. It didn't happen. Now, we've seen Giannis break slates and hit the high raw points on games that have been fourth quarter blowouts because he's just done so much work in the first 3 to 3.5 quarters that maybe he drops 55 to 70 fantasy points and doesn't really have to play in the fourth. I'm okay with having Giannis stand alone in my builds. Now, if I was multi-entering, personally, I like the takes on Brook Lopez. I like the takes on Bobby Portis. I don't know if I'd run them in every lineup, but if you do and one of them hits and you set a build rule to have, one of them, you would be in phenomenal shape. I don't know if I'd go that route, but what I do think, but it is plausible for sure. What I would do rationally is use Brook Lopez, use Bobby Portis as conditional players, and make sure wherever I have them, I have at least, 2 Charlotte guys running it back. Maybe 2 to 3. 3 would be kind of an interesting game stack. If 3,
See, I don't want that because if I have that many Charlotte players, that's when I want Giannis. I would do that with my Giannis lineups, but I don't want that with like somebody like a Portis, because I think if this is a 20-point game and Portis and Giannis doesn't play the fourth quarter, Portis plays the first 7-8 minutes of that fourth quarter before he gets pulled for the other backups. I still think he could get big run in a blowout, and Brook Lopez could block 6-7 shots. You know what I mean? So I don't necessarily think I want to do that, especially because like Charlotte is nice and cheap on some other sites, but Ball, who always has an upside, Plumlee's got some tournament upside, but Rozier is really the only one who's like priced at all appropriately on this team. Everybody else is too expensive.
And I think attaching Rozier to Milwaukee pieces will help mitigate some of that high ownership as well.
Yes.
See what I like doing. I don't think you have to do this to all of your builds, but if I'm playing 100 lineups, maybe I'll run 50, and I'll have Giannis stand alone. And then in my second, I'll save those lineups, lineup HQ. And then I'm like, all right, like I want to ensure that I have whatever shares I have of Giannis in my second batch of 50 attached to some Charlotte game stack. So then maybe I'll go and set, maybe I don't want 3 Charlotte guys, but maybe I want at least 1 to 2 people in Charlotte running it back with my Giannis shares. So I know what I have at least, in a portion of my builds for that evening. So I think there's definitely game stack appeal here. I think we're both in agreement on that for sure. Whether it's going to be Rozier or it's going to be LaMelo keeping the game close, or Rozier's so cheap that it could be both of them, right? They score in different ways, as LaMelo is just an elite distributor and also gets those scrappy steals and blocks as well. So you're right. Charlotte is absolutely awful against bigs. I expect someone to have an anomaly rebound game on Milwaukee as well here. So back over to you, my friend. What else we want to get to?
Briefly going to touch on Detroit and San Antonio because Killian Hayes is currently picking up 30+% ownership. This is a 1-point spread and a super high total. Fade Killian Hayes at 30% ownership. Bogdanovich, Burks, and Jaden Ivey are all reasonable tournament plays. Just don't play Killian Hayes at that kind of ownership today. Yes, he's got a ceiling, but it's an 11-game slate. Just 30% ownership for Killian Hayes. That's not going to be for me today. Same thing with this other side. Keldon Johnson is a great play today. He's going to project phenomenally, but 50% Keldon, yes, he's a cash game walk today. But 50% Keldon Johnson, that's going to be a no-no for me in tournaments. These Spurs guys are priced cheaper on some other sites, but I do still like Trey Jones today for tournaments. He's someone I'm very interested in getting to. I briefly touched on Washington and OKC. I don't really like any of these OKC guys unless I'm going to try and take a large field shot on like Jalen Williams, Mike Muscala, Kenrich Williams, just because they're so short on big men. But again, this just doesn't seem like the site to take a shot on OKC today. FanDuel has been tough for pricing all year long, especially lately. We're used to them being the looser site. They've been tight as heck lately. There are a few specific players that we've outlined already. That's one of the reasons I touched on Washington specifically, that are just cheaper on FanDuel than they are on DraftKings or any other sites today. And those are the places that I want to target some tournament spots today. Next place that I think we need to spend a little bit of time on, though, here is Cleveland, and maybe not even that much time because it's pretty straightforward. Donovan Mitchell is resting. Darius Garland is questionable. If Garland is in, he's a fantastic tournament play today. It's a thumb injury. So we're probably not going to see that many minutes decreased off of him. He's probably going to be fine. We're projecting him for 35 minutes. No Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, 35 minutes, sub 5% ownership. I think that's one of the better tournament plays on the slate. Mobley and Jared Allen, Kevin Love, yeah, all these guys are fine. If we get Darius Garland out, though, Raul Nato, I think, becomes the best value play on the entire slate, which is crazy to say, but it's true. Chetty Osman is fine, but again, he's another guy that's a lot cheaper in other places. I don't have a ton of interest in Cleveland here. In Denver here. I would definitely get way overweight to Jokic in tournaments, sub 5%. I'll get 5 to 10% Jokic in tournaments if I'm running a lot of lineups. But all of these other guys going up against Cleveland, this is just going to be a fade for me. Maybe I would get to a little bit of Michael Porter because he's so cheap and he's got a ceiling and if he gets hot. But Cleveland's just such a good defensive team, even without Garland and Donovan Mitchell, who are rated very well defensively. I don't know how much of that is them being really good defenders or them just, hey, you guys are allowed to go to the rim because we have Jared Allen and Evan Mobley there. And so I think this team should still be very good defensively without these guys. Clippers in Minnesota. We got Kawhi Leonard doubtful, Paul George questionable. It's a back-to-back. You'd think these guys are going to sit, but this was a 40-point game yesterday, and they barely even played in the second half, if at all. So maybe these guys are going to come around here. I don't want to speculate on this too long because they're going to talk about this at crunch time. We're going to have some value if George and Leonard are both out. If they're both in, this is probably a cross-off spot. Last game of the slate,
Can I backtrack
10:30.
1 second? Just 1
Heck
second.
yeah.
On the Minnesota side, if Paul George and Kawhi both sit, I'm loving Anthony Edwards for tournaments here. That's such a hit to the Clippers' defensive efficiency that no one's playing Anthony Edwards tonight, especially since it's at the tail end of the slate as well.
Also, another one of those players that we talked about that FanDuel's got some tight salaries, but this is a guy that's cheaper than he is anywhere else on the industry. Anthony Edwards makes for a great tournament play. I think D'Angelo Russell and Gobert are somewhat interesting, but I'd rather get to them elsewhere. Edwards is interesting for me. And then even somebody like Kyle Anderson, I think I'd maybe want to get to if Naz Reid is going to be out. Last game of the slate, late night hammer, Atlanta and LA. This to me is the most interesting GPP game on the slate. It's the highest total on the slate, 2.5 point spread. Trae Young, best tournament play on the slate, sub 5% ownership at 9,500. That is the singular best tournament play on the slate, in my opinion. Onyeka Okongwu and John Collins chalk. I'm definitely going to just press the X button on Onyeka Okongwu, and maybe I'll take some shots on John Collins just because he has been playing so darn well lately. Now, Okongwu should still get the minutes because there's Thomas Bryant on the other side, but 30+% owned Okongwu on an 11-game slate. That's going to be a no from me.
Nope. That's a big no. This is just a crazy game. And eventually, it doesn't matter who's in or who's out. Eventually, Trae Young's going to drop 60 and break his slate. Eventually, DeJounte Murray's going to go for 55. It could very well be tonight. We know the Lakers play at a fast pace, and they're very bad defensively, especially without Anthony Davis on the court. And I know LeBron's price is up, but, LeBron has been fantastic the last couple of weeks without Anthony Davis. LeBron could break this slate, too, at zero ownership as well. So, if you're at the top of tournament leaderboards come like 9:45 Eastern, I'm still holding my breath because I feel like there's going to be a ceiling game somewhere in this contest, TJ.
Trae Young and LeBron James is the best tournament stack on this whole slate to me. That's just so phenomenal of a pairing. Both and we're right now projecting for 5% combined ownership for the two of them. It's just phenomenal. I think if you do something like that and you play your Brook Lopez or Bobby Portis instead of Giannis, like that just to me is a way of getting way different than everybody else without sacrificing any upside, really. Like to harp on Atlanta quick, DeJounte Murray and Trae Young, they're two of my favorite tournament plays on the entire slate. I love both of them. They're both just phenomenal.
I know DeJounte's been a little rough around the edges, recently. I mean, he had a 53-point game against Golden State earlier this week.
He was struggling coming back from injury, but he's been playing better these last couple.
He's so cheap. He's just so cheap. And you know what? Like, he'd be balling out if John Collins wasn't balling himself. So I like all these Atlanta guys. I like LeBron in this game, and they're all going to be grossly underowned tonight. So, if you're multi-entering, this is where I think you get your leverage. And that's such a mouth-watering game here with such a high total. I like it a lot here. So good call with the Milwaukee-Charlotte game. This one is also extremely interesting. And the good thing about this game is if you're looking at the Atlanta-LA game to, be involved in a lot of your builds, you're really not waiting for any news in this one. So you can get a bulk of your builds done if you're penciling this game as a big part of your builds tonight.
Yeah, I'm with you. A couple other things I want to touch on that last game. I think if you're playing a lot of lineups, Bogdanovich and DeAndre Hunter are both interesting. Hunter's been playing huge minutes since coming back from injury and putting up big scores as well. I love LeBron, but I even think Russell Westbrook is interesting for tournaments. Thomas Bryant's interesting for tournaments. Schroeder is a strong tournament play. If we get Troy Brown out today, fire up Wenyen Gabriel as a tournament value play. I think he would even be very interesting. This whole Lakers team is going underowned, and I like all of them today. They're without Austin Reeves. They might be without Troy Brown. They're without Anthony Davis. They're without just a handful of kind of crappy rotation players. I love this entire game, and the Lakers side for value on top of LeBron, and then just that DeJounte and Trae Young combo is just fascinating. I even think it's somewhat interesting in tournaments. Like, play LeBron with Young and DeJounte. Do both. Like, I think that's actually viable on this slate. I wouldn't want to stack them both together unless it is a full stack with some Lakers players, but that game just has so much fantasy goodness, and it's going overlooked at this point. Stay tuned to Grinders Live and to Crunch Time because there is going to be a lot of injury news. You might be doing some late swapping today, and the crew is going to have you covered for that one. And then we also have more FanDuel Friday coming later tonight, breaking down the NFL slate. Dre and I will be taking you through Week 18 of the NFL. Tons of injuries, tons of people resting, some playoff implications, some teams with just would rather pack it in for this week. And so we'll be taking you through that as well. Luuch, do you got anything before we get out of here?
No, let's hit the road, buddy.
Let's do it. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell, hit that like button, and we will see you later. Peace.